it's me, Vicky. Thank you so much for tuning in. And by the way, this is my YouTube channel where we weekly upload videos about discussions, cool and fun facts, so just questions you have about American and English literature. And again, thank you so much for watching, and just stay tuned. We're going to discuss an amazing piece of art of English literature, and it's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And because you could consider Aldous Huxley's Brave New World as some kind of founding father of dystopian novels, we're going to discuss what new, modern, common movies are based on that book. So what ideas are basically stolen from the book. Before we start comparing the movie to the novel, I'm at first going to always give you a short summary of so that you can just think with me and compare the movie to the novel for yourself. The first movie we are going to start off with is Equilibrium, and it was directed by Kurt Wimmer in 2002. And our movie, of course, starts in a futuristic world where a strict regimen has eliminated war by suppressing emotions. So, for example, books, music, art, and of course feelings are punished heavenly, and feelings, for example, are even punished by death. Our protagonist, cleric or celeric John Preston, is a top-ranking government agent responsible for destroying those who restrict the rules. But when he one morning misses his daily dose of prosium, which is an emotion suppressant, or an emotion suppressant drug, however you want to call it, he begins to feel and is now the only one who can overthrow the regimen he has once worked for. Doom, doom, doom. So, first of all, I wanted to just point out that both the movie and the novel are using drugs. Here they're using to suppress emotions. In the other one, they're just trying to evoke better emotions instead of feeling gloomy all day. But it's basically the same. So I don't see a difference there, or a big difference. Then in both movies, in both the movie and the novel, they have world controllers. They have conditioned test tube babies, so that are basically 3 things, and they do all these 3 things to create one equal unit. They both have no relational attachments, so no family or just relational feelings, because of course this whole movie does not or in this whole movie, there shouldn't be any emotions as far as the society or the majority of society goes. And all of this is done or is practiced because of world peace, of course. So I think, or in my opinion, this movie Equilibrium is an exact copy of Brave New World. Just by mentioning all these criteria, I think they basically just copied the whole book. I don't know if that's allowed. I've honestly not seen the whole movie. I've seen only parts of it, so I'm not the one who gets to judge. But just by these criteria, especially these dystopian criteria, they definitely stole their idea from Aldous Huxley. We're going to discuss an amazing piece of art of English literature, and it's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And because you could consider Aldous Huxley's Brave New World as some kind of founding father of dystopian novels, we're going to discuss what new, modern, common movies are based on that book. So what ideas are basically stolen from the book. Start this by giving you a fan-made teaser trailer of the book or the novel Brave New World, because I think it's easier for you to understand if you can visualize the plot a little better. And later on we're going to go into more detail with the book or the novel or the plot in general, so that you can then later on compare the movies to the actual novel better, because I think for that you'll need a little more detail than shown in the trailer. But just now, keep on watching.
Just take a few extra grams of Soma.
Oh, but to steal an immortal blessing from the lips of my Juliet.
Heliofusion plant number 3. Send solidarity forces immediately.
I want poetry, I want danger, I want goodness, I want sin. Wasn't that dramatic? Yeah, right. But which dystopian novel isn't dramatic? Am I right? So now, as I already said, we're going to go a little more into detail for the plot of the whole movie. And just if you're wondering what I'm doing down there or why I'm looking down there, I'm having a lot of notes here, so just forgive me if I'm sometimes looking down a little bit. But our story, actually, of Brave New World begins in the future, to be exact 632 years after Ford. And Ford is their new god, basically, or which is actually a real reference to Ford, the car company, which I think is funny. But it begins 632 after Ford, when all of civilization has been destroyed by a terrible war. Basically every single dystopia begins like that. And society in these days is built on a strict dictatorship by the 10 world leaders, or world controllers, sorry. And is based on a caste system, and these castes are basically divided in alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and epsilon. The highest rank is alpha plus, and the minor ranks are then, for example, delta and epsilon. And of course, the higher ranks are also given superior tasks in the whole entire system. So they'll be like doctors or working for the government, and the epsilons will do more agricultural stuff, for example. But this whole system is built up because they try to maintain peace like that, so that another war can't break out. And they maintain this peace by conditioning infant minds and by soothing adult minds with a drug so-called soma. And it makes you basically feel happy, even though your actual feelings are saying something else. So it's basically like a emotion suppressant, and you're going to see that this is a recurring theme in basically every dystopian novel. But also how they're controlling their citizens is by superior science and superior scientific devices and just research. The children are not born, but they're produced by a hatchery company, and they're determined by birth what their future task is going to be in the society. So what specific caste they're going to be in, for example. And also marriage and the traditional laws, basically, or just the traditional view of family is absolutely disliked and disgraced in this times, because it's basically perverted almost. And they also control every single knowledge about history that the population these days gets. It's quite a lot your brain has to now go through, and just maybe you're a little bit overwhelmed, but it gets better, guys. So at the beginning of the novel, students are basically just guided through the hatchery center, and they're there. The reader gets a better understanding of how the whole breeding or genetically modifying process, just how that goes along, and how the children basically get conditioned. So how the whole system builds up on that conditioning and on this preparing and caste system and all that kind of stuff. Then two characters are introduced, which are Henry Foster and Lenina Crown. They both have a relationship, basically. So they have been dating for quite a long time, which isn't seen, or which generally isn't viewed as good in the public. So and is socially unacceptable, of course. And that's why Lenina is being warned by her best friend, and then she decides to break up with Henry and decides to rather go with Bernard Marx to New Mexico, to the reservation, to the Savage Reservation. That's what it's called. And that's where the Savage Reservation is, where people are seen as unworthy to live in the civilized world because they still stick to old traditions and habits. And before Bernard can leave for the Savage Reservation, he gets threatened by his boss, the director of the hatchery center, to throw him out of, or to exile him, basically, if he continues with his strange behavior, because Bernard Marx, Lenina's new date, basically isn't like any other alpha plus you would usually meet. He's a little different because there are rumors going on that there has been something wrong with his conditioning process or his hatchery process, basically. But he's more of a of a deeper character, and he feels very displaced in his situation and just in his life in general. So when Bernard and Lenina arrive in New Mexico, they meet John the Savage, and his biological mother Linda, a former utopian citizen, and she told him that she was abandoned by the rector of hatchery, so Bernard's boss, and couldn't return when she found out that she was pregnant with John. So she raised John in the Savage Reservation, where she also got older and wrinklier and actually uglier in utopian, from utopian standards. And then Bernard decides to bring those two back to the civilization and makes an object of ridicule of his boss and does not have to worry about being exiled anymore. So since John has never left New Mexico and he has basically never experienced a different life than at the Savage Reservation, he becomes an object of everyone's curiosity and attention, and therefore Bernard is now also getting a lot of attention through John, and that he really likes that. But things do not go as smoothly as planned because John is really repulsed by the new world and becomes very depressed. And this emotional state only gets worse since Lenina wants to since Lenina finds herself being very only physically attracted to John, but John is repulsed by that idea of physical attraction. He has a way deeper feelings and thoughts for Lenina than she could ever imagine, and so that doesn't work out either, which then leads also to another point, because Linda is dying in the hospital, and that makes John absolutely crazy, and he tries to start a rebellion, and as a punishment he gets sent away, so exiled to a different island, and there he can't live his life alone. There he also gets distracted by tourists from the civilized world, and then in just in anger, fear, and the feeling of loneliness, he hangs himself, so commits suicide. Now I'm going to start showing you my top 3 movies that I thought had a lot in common with the novel. I wanted to say movie, but the novel Brave New World, and but I still wanted to keep it interesting and just get a good variety of things so that they do not all do the same and just basically sound the same. And so I just wanted to keep it interesting by choosing three movies that had something in common with Brave New World but weren't the same. Before we start comparing the movie to the novel, I'm at first going to always give you a short summary of so that you can just think with me and compare the movie to the novel for yourself. The first movie we are going to start off with is Equilibrium, and it was directed by Kurt Wimmer in 2002. And our movie, of course, starts in a futuristic world where a strict regimen has eliminated war by suppressing emotions. So, for example, books, music, art, and, of course, feelings are punished heavenly, and feelings, for example, are even punished by death. Our protagonist, cleric or celeric John Pression, is a top-ranking government agent responsible for destroying those who restrict the rules. But when he one morning misses his daily dose of prosium, which is an emotion suppressant, or an emotion suppressant drug, however you want to call it, he begins to feel and is now the only one who can overthrow the regimen he has once worked for. Doom, doom, doom. So, first of all, I wanted to just point out that both the movie and the novel are using drugs. Here, they're using to suppress emotions. In the other one, they're just trying to evoke better emotions instead of feeling gloomy all day. But it's basically the same. So I don't see a difference there, or a big difference. Then in both movies, in both the movie and the novel, they have world controllers. They have conditioned test tube babies, so that are basically 3 things, and they do all these 3 things to create one equal unit. They both have no relational attachments, so no family or just relational feelings, because of course this whole movie does not or in this whole movie there shouldn't be any emotions as far as the society or the majority of society goes. And all of this is done or is practiced because of world peace, of course. So I think, or in my opinion, this movie Equilibrium is an exact copy of Brave New World. Just by mentioning all these criteria, I think they basically just copied the whole book. I don't know if that's allowed. I've honestly not seen the whole movie. I've seen only parts of it, so I'm not the one who gets to judge. But just by these criteria, especially these dystopian criteria, they definitely stole their idea from Aldous Huxley. The movie is called Gattaca, and it was directed by Andrew Niccol in 1997, so it's a little older, but I think it's still modern, and I've even watched it in one biology class, so I know it from school. And in this movie, Vincent, our protagonist, is one of the last babies born, so normally or traditionally born into a sterile, genetically enhanced world where life expectancy and disease likelihood are basically eradicated by birth. During this time, the society or the scientists in society analyze your DNA and determine where you belong in life. Due to Vincent, less than suitable genetic makeup, Vincent has become one of the underclass of humans that are only useful for menial jobs. To go ahead and to literally travel to the stars, he assumes the identity of Jerome Morrow. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. A perfect genetic specimen, and with professional help, Vincent learns to deceive DNA samples testing and is so close to achieving his dream until the program director is killed and the police begins an investigation threatening his identity. I've discovered throughout reading the summaries and just watching the videos about Gattaca is that their society structure, how they, for example, just determine a baby's life by their DNA, leads to rebellion and discrimination within their perfect systems. Just like in Brave New World, later on, John the Savage tries to rebel against the system. Just that here it is a rebellion within the actual society, and John is basically like an outcast. And also what I've discovered is that genetic engineering is a big part in this movie, which is definitely also in Brave New World, and it takes over society's norms over traditional natural birth, and that those two points are basically creating a basis for the lack of individuality in both the movie and the book. So how that is created in both of these medias is, first of all, in Brave New World, the new generation is created on a conveyor belt of cloned embryos, as we all know. And here in the movie Gattaca, the parents are the ones who decide the whole future of the baby. And then in Brave New World, the protagonist, John the Savage, wants away from the system, so he tries to basically break out and tries to rebel. And Vincent, our protagonist in Gattaca, breaks into the system, which is a slight difference, but I think just to get the idea of it, they basically both rebel against the system. And then the social class is, for example, in A Brave New World, determined by people in the fertilizer room. So, and in Gattaca, again, the parents are deciding about what kind of status or what kind of standard you're going to have later on. Of course, in Brave New World, the lower castes are viewed as also lower standard, because mostly they create some kind of defect, and in Gattaca, the naturally born are seen as the lowest caste members, basically. And what also really stood out to me was that John and Vincent, so John the Savage and Vincent, do not fit into the dystopian society at all. They do not conform to any rules, and so they are the ones that basically portray their own individualism, that the ones that stand up for individuality. And I think that's what is basically the center in the movie Gattaca, and what we can again find in the film Brave New World. Okay, so now we're coming to our final and third movie, which I'm going to compare to Brave New World, and it is WALL-E. It's actually, when I found that movie and when I read about it, and I was shocked how close it is, or how many ideas WALL-E, a Disney movie, and Brave New World share. So WALL-E is directed by Andrew Stanton, and it was released in 2008. And the movie itself opens on Earth 700 years into the future, where a lot of our environmental pollution happened, which was the result of humans destroying the environment, of course, by, for example, mindlessly over-consuming unnecessary goods by a specific store called By and Large. I think that's how it's pronounced. And By and Large was then getting so big that they basically bought out mankind, completely erased it from Earth, and now the rest humans are living in space. Now I'm going to directly refer to Brave New World, because Aldous Huxley uses the same strategy, because in his book, he wipes out basically all history and all real history of mankind, and even though the place, so the environment, stayed the same in Brave New World, same people basically. In the book, no, not in the book, in the movie, WALL-E rely on principles of Ford basically to start new and make the world better. So they both share common principles and just a common system or basis of knowledge to educate their the people in the movie and in the novel. And then going on with the protagonist in the book and the movie. The protagonist Wally is he's a garbage collecting robot, and he is the only one left to clean up the mess that was left on Earth by mankind, basically. And he's mesmerized with trinkets of Earth history and culture. And he has, with that, a lot in common with Bernard Marx, but also with John the Savage, because all three of them are displaced in their own society and act after their own beliefs. And they three fall in love with someone more modern and more adapted to their time. For Wally, it's the robot Eve, and for Bernard and John the Savage, it's Lennon. Movie goes on with Wally going up to space with Eva, following her, and Wally is basically alarmed by the outer appearance of the people that he sees then in this outer space planet or place. And that look, behave, and are different from just how he would have imagined it or just how he ever experienced it so far. But he courageously introduces himself, and even though he looks old and rusty to everybody else, the other people accept him. So that is also the same with John the Savage when he comes to London, and he basically introduces himself as the Savage from the reservation in New Mexico, the first real born child, and even though it is also very bizarre and very different from what he's used to, he just basically reacts like Wally. And also comparing their both societies, so Wally's and John the Savage's, they're both living in a very hedonistic society, which means so hedonistic is a term from philosophy, and it basically means that their lives are just built on one aim, which is to achieve pleasure by all means in a happy life, and that's basically also the only thing that gives sense to your life. Also, both societies are affected by technology. For example, so the people that came from Earth to space are now riding around in hoovering chairs. There's no walking involved. There's a consistent feed of television chatting, and they only drink their meals because out of laziness probably, and they barely move, which I think is a very considerable and plausible thought. Just mentioning it at the end, I think that doesn't have anything to do with John the Savage nor Brave New World, but I just think that we barely walk or like to ride by bike anymore in our society. We mostly take the car, and our car already is so technically advanced that we can chat and watch TV even in the car. And I also think that our obesity rates are so high now that it's considerable that this could be our future. And I think just imagining that Wally has so much in common with a very highly advanced book, and that Wally has so much in common with maybe our near future, who knows, is also a very interesting but scary thought. And just to finish that off, I wanted to quickly mention some other really good movies that I also found were interesting. Compare it with Brave New World. One movie would be 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Demolition Man. I also had Blade Runner written down. Brazil was one, Repo Man, and Total Recall. I just did not mention them or put them into my video because they would just repeat a whole lot that I've already gone through based on the 3 examples that I mentioned in my video. So I just wanted to mention them really quickly because I still thought that they're worth mentioning. And as my final conclusion, I would say that all these 3 movies had a lot in common with Brave New World, especially their high advanced standards of technology. I think that was always in first place, or just the basis for getting so far and just stabilizing society after the war or whatever happened to society. Then all societies or all people were from birth categorized in some kind of way, if it was by parenting or if it just was by giving drugs. So there was always some kind of caste or caste system. And they also all had in common that the protagonists never confirmed with the surrounding society. So they always had a very individualistic view. That's what I actually especially like about dystopian novels, dystopian movies the most, that the main character is mostly the most relatable out of all, because the surrounding environment is mostly just conforming to the system and are not really individualistic. And I think in our times, even though some people might criticize that, but in our times I think individualism is such an important value that yeah, we just have to relate to it. That's our nature. Thank you so much for your patience and for listening and just taking time and going with me on this journey through those 3 really exciting and amazing movies and the amazing book, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, that I compared those 3 movies to. And I'll hopefully see you in the next video. Bye!